Welcome to week 8. This is your last week in this course, and today we're going to be talking about leading your team. Since this is our last week, let's recap. So by now, you know how to make a plan to reach your goals. You know how to ask for appointments. You know how to sell on those appointments. You know how to turn those appointments into more appointments by asking for referrals, and you know how to recruit others. Today, we're going to talk about the typical life cycle of a wellness advocate. We're going to talk about your role as a leader. We're going to explore why wellness advocates fail so that you're better able to prevent their failure or be prepared for it. We're going to talk about the keys to leading an independent team of awesome wellness advocates. And then we'll put together some outlines for your expectation setting appointment with your new team members, your basic training, your advanced training, and your outline for how to develop your team members' skills. And before we get into the details about what to do with your team members, we need to understand some things about team members in general. I think you'll find this to be true for most people as they decide to do this as a business. So here's your typical life cycle. The first is, oh my gosh, I love this product. So they fall in love with the product. People aren't going to sell things that they don't really believe in for the most part, so they have to love the product. And then they're going to, during their first sales conversation with you, they're probably already thinking about people who would love the product too. They're probably thinking, ooh, this is something that a lot of people would probably buy. And this belief is super important in their wellness advocate cycle. Then they say they'll give it a go, and they have their first 10 interactions. So you may think that it's before this that they decide that they're going to do the business and they start setting up appointments. But at this point, they're still trying to decide if this is something that they actually want to do. For most people, their first 10 interactions will really determine if they're going to move forward or not. Every once in a while, you'll come across someone who isn't deterred by failure, but most of us just aren't wired that way. So if in their first 10 interactions, nobody buys or only one person buys, they're going to lose belief that they can do this. However, if in their first 10 interactions, half of them buy, then they're going to be a lot more confident that this is something that they can build over time. And after those first 10 interactions, this is really where people make the decision to build or not. So you'll really want to be close to them during those first 10 interactions. Then they'll be able to really make a commitment to this. And then they have 3 months to make a little bit of money, not thousands of dollars. You'll need to help them set expectations. In 3 months, they're paying for their products or making a little bit of cash, but they need to at least earn $1 more than they're investing by the 3-month mark, or they're going to start to give up. You need to make sure that they are making progress and going forward. Now let's look at why wellness advocates fail, because we really need to understand this, especially in their first 3 months, so that we can help prevent that. So the first is that they're just running around randomly sampling to people. So they don't have a plan. They don't know how they're going to make money or how to organize their schedule or what success actually looks like or anything. They just think, oh, I'm going to do this. And if the target is always moving or there is no target, they're never going to hit it. Second, they lack confidence. And this usually comes down to not knowing what they're going to say or do or how to start. Now, this one is probably the most likely. They either lack the people or they think they lack people. A lot of times this comes from the thought process, who do I know who will buy oils, and prejudging people versus just actually who they know. This can be more of a challenge for introverts than extroverts. So if it's not a challenge for you, don't dismiss this challenge for other people. It can feel really overwhelming for your new team member. If they feel like they're running out of people, it's going to stall them. It's possible that they just lack skills. So we've been developing your skills for the last 7 weeks. Most people aren't naturally born salespeople. If they can't close a sale, then they're not going to do well. The good news is that skills are teachable. Number 5, not making money. So maybe their spouse is saying, you're spending more money than you're bringing in. They do need to understand that there's a little upfront investment and that it's going to take some time to build a real business so that they have realistic expectations. But since we've streamlined the sales process, your people should be able to show a profit in their first 3 months. And then a huge reason that wellness advocates fail is that they're putting too much pressure on everything. They could be putting too much pressure on their customers. You could be putting too much pressure on them to be a superstar right away, or they could be putting too much pressure on themselves to be a superstar right away. Pressure isn't a good thing in sales. That's why we remove the pressure in all of our approaches. So you need to have a plan that you're confident you can execute. Now, these first 3 months are super critical. You don't want your friend, family member, or new team member to feel all beat up. So here's why you need to stay really close with them. They're going to exaggerate their failures. They're going to say, it was so horrible, they only bought a few oils, which is actually a win, right? They need to be profitable. So, they don't have to make a lot, like we mentioned. You just need to make sure that they aren't spending more than they're making, and they aren't starting to go into debt because this business, because that puts too much pressure on them and it's not good. Remember that they're evaluating whether they really want to do this in this first few months. And they're going to be working with people they know, and we need to be really cognizant of that. Those people become their encouragement system. So if I'm starting something, my friends and family are going to give me some grace. But if I totally stink and act like a really big jerk, it's just horrible. And my support system might say, hey, this might not be a good fit for you. So you want to make sure that they're making as good of an impression as possible. They can be using outlines, of course, and they can be making mistakes, but they need to have some success because their support system is going to be there watching. So their first 3 months are really important, and it's absolutely worth it to you to spend the extra time up front to set them up for success, as opposed to seeing if they have what it takes all on their own. When people receive solid, good guidance from the beginning, they're going to be so much happier, so much more confident getting off to a great start, and they're going to stay longer because of it. If they have a really hard first few months, some people do make it, but most people don't, and that could have been changed with an intervention by you. So let's talk about your job as a leader. 1 is to encourage and excite them to reach their goals. 2 is to train them in product knowledge. 3 is to train them to sell more. 4 is to listen to them when they're down, because they will be. And your 5th job is to keep things simple. Keep things as simple as possible so that they can move forward. If you try to tell them everything about everything all the time and keep it really complicated, it's going to be hard for them to know what to focus on next. So keep them focused on one thing at a time. And then let's talk about what your job as a leader is not. So it is not your job to build their team for them. In the beginning, there will be a little of you helping them, but it's different than doing all of the work for them. It's also not your job to do the things that they don't want to do. There are some things that you might work on together, but it's their business. And if they don't want to do it, it doesn't mean that it automatically goes up to you to do just because you make money as well. You make decisions for your business on what you're going to do for everybody on your team, not just based on someone else not wanting to do it. And it's not your job to put pressure on them to sell. I know you want every builder to be your next superstar, but people need to go at their own pace in order to hit their own goals. Here's some good news. Leadership is sales. And we've just spent the last 7 weeks learning sales skills. You're maybe not selling a tangible product when you're leading, but you are selling an opportunity, you're selling thoughts, you're selling action items, you're selling the next step, you're selling buy-in. So you're going to use a lot of the same processes that we've been using to sell appointments, to sell on appointments, to sell to get referrals, and so on. So let's break down the sales process that you've already learned, and you're going to see how this is also appropriate for selling every idea to your team members. So the first thing, you're going to remove the pressure. So we've talked about that for everything. Be sure to take the pressure off. And then you're going to try to understand their goals or their problems. You're going to help them with solutions to those problems. And you're going to close and create action. These are the same 4 steps that we've been doing for the past 7 weeks. So hopefully you're starting to get really good at it. You don't ever want to take any of these things for granted. Like, hey, you need to do this or do that. Every single thing you want them to do, you need to go through all 4 steps and sell properly to gain their buy-in, to close and create action. If you miss those first few steps, you're going to find that people won't follow through, and you're going to continue to see the same bottlenecks that you have now. And those same bottlenecks that you used to see with your customers before you started using your sales skills. So let's talk about keys to leading an independent team, because this is what we want, right? We want our team members to be independent, and they are actually. They are all independent contractors, and so we can't tell them to do things. They're not our employees. We're going to focus on their goals, not your goals for them, not the next rank, just their goals. You need to know what their goals are, and then you need to walk alongside them and help them to achieve it. If they set a low goal, there's nothing stopping them from crushing it. So if they say, oh, I only want to make $100 a month, it's not a bad thing if they accidentally make $300. So let them do their own goal setting, and they'll learn a lot in that process. And then just focus on teaching and encouragement. There's no need for any tough love. Just be there for them, be their support system, because their actual in real life support system probably isn't going to understand what this is all about. And then speak their love language and know their strengths. So if you don't already know about love languages, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and it talks about how people give and receive love in different ways. I know some of you have taken the quiz online and sent me your results. If you haven't, please do. And I'm going to be sending out a link in your follow-up email this week. And here's why this is important. So my primary love language is acts of service. If your primary love language is words of affirmation, and you don't really feel super appreciated when somebody does something for you, and I don't tell you how awesome you are from time to time, you're not going to feel appreciated. The other really important thing for you to understand about yourself as a leader and about your team members is strengths. The assessment to learn your top 5 is just $20. Although they are having a special right now on all 34 for $50. So if you really want to understand yourself well, then you can unlock all of them for $50. I did that so that I could understand my bottom 5, because that can be really important as well. But doing just the top 5 can be super helpful. It will help you as a leader to understand your strengths, and it will help you coach your team members to know and understand their strengths. In fact, if you are planning on leading a team, another alternative to just buying the Strengths Finder assessment is to buy the strengths-based leadership book, and it comes with a code to unlock your top 5. So you could just buy the book and then get the assessment for free with the book. Okay, next, you need to sell every idea properly. And I have to admit, I have not been great at this in the past. So use the process that we just talked about. Ask them how they feel about action items, and make sure that you have their buy-in and explain everything properly. And then monitor their progress. So use the sales tracker with your team. And I recommend using Google Drive to give each new team member their own sales tracker so that you can also see their progress. You need to monitor their progress so that you can see if they are hitting bottlenecks. If you can stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of them, you're going to be able to give tremendous value to your team members. So don't feel like you need to be an expert at this. Just keep working your business and keep working with your team. And as long as you're a step or 2 ahead of them, you're going to be fine. So your first action items this week are to take the 5 love languages test and take the Strengths Finder assessment, and send me those results if you haven't already. Let's go over what to do with your new builder. So what's happened is you have probably had a first appointment with them, you've done your follow-up, they've said, oh, I would like to learn more about earning money with doTERRA, and you've had your recruiting conversation with them, and they've said, yeah, I think I want to do that. So I'm going to give you an outline so that you know what to do. It's a lot more listening than you might think. It's not about the comp plan, and it's not about training. Let's make sure that you're both on the same page so that you can have a great, trusting relationship moving forward. So first up, goals. I'm sure you're shocked, right? Tell me about your goals. What are you hoping to accomplish? Gather as much information as you can. How much do you want to work? How long do you want to do this for until you reach a certain income level? Do you want to do this part-time? Do you want to do it full-time? Some people are crazy and do it way overtime. Just where are they? You want to try and figure out where they're at and what they want to accomplish and when they want to accomplish it by. Next, you're going to try and learn about their strengths. So that just sounds like, tell me about your strengths. Just know that not many people are really in tune with their strengths enough to be able to articulate them. So they may not be able to answer this question. Either way, you'll want to have them take the Strengths Finder profile so that you can best know how to work with them. Another way to ask this is, tell me, what are some things that you're really good at? Or where do you think you're going to be able to excel when it comes to network marketing? And then on the flip side, weaknesses or worries. You've got to address their concerns. Remember, you're not telling them anything right now. You're just gathering information so that you can help them be successful. And to do that, you need an honest assessment of where they're starting. These aren't good or bad. We're just getting information. So this sounds like great. So those are some of the things you're really good at. Now, what are some of your weaknesses, and what are some things that you might be worried about? You want all of this out so that you can give them a chance to get it out of themselves. You don't want them worrying. It's natural to have worries and concerns when you're starting something new. But if they don't have worries, you also don't want to give them things to worry about. You're just writing it all down. You're not trying to solve anything right now. After you've written it all down, you just say, okay, great. Now I know what I can help you with. And then you want to find out what they expect from you as their leader. This is a great question to find out how you can be most effective with them. They may say, I want you to push me, or I want you to coach me. Then it's their idea to push them and help them to be their best, which is what you were already going to do for them anyway. But when it's their idea, you have way more buy-in. And then here's where you get to talk. Once you get all of that down about their expectations, you can say, well, those are fair. And here are other things you can expect from me as your leader. And then you give them a list of other things that you plan on doing for them as their leader. So some examples of this: I'm going to be completely honest with you on what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. I'm going to try and catch you doing things right and recognize you in front of the team as an example of what to do. Another thing you can expect from me is I'm going to work hard to help you be successful. Is that fair? And of course, they'll say, yeah, I think those things are fair. And then the next thing you need to do is share your expectations of them. Here are some of my expectations of you. I expect you to be honest with me at all times on where you're at. Anytime you have a question, you let me know. There's no such thing as a dumb question. If you feel like something isn't working out, I just ask that you tell me right away so that we can stay on the same page. That's my biggest expectation of you. And that you stay committed to learning new things. Do you think those expectations are fair? And they'll probably say, yeah, of course. And lastly, if you're working with a friend or someone you already know, the last thing you need to cover in your expectation setting is setting your friend-mentor boundaries. So if you're working with someone you know, things can get complicated. Everything so far has been to prevent things from getting complicated later. And if you're working with a friend, this is especially important to make sure that you set up at the beginning. When you're working with a friend or a family member, you're going to have to wear two different hats, and it's important not to mix them up because it can get really confusing or annoying. So here's how you do this. So during your scheduled business time, you are the mentor. So you're going to have your scheduled mentor appointments every week or every other week or whatever it is that makes sense for their business. When it's scheduled, you are the mentor. When it's unscheduled, you're just their friend. So what that means is that if you're just hanging out, you're not the one to bring up the business, unless it's just a simple, how are things going? You don't want them to end up feeling like doTERRA is everything in their friendship, but they have the authority to bring up the conversation when you're hanging out. So if you're hanging out and they say, hey, let me tell you about that class I had, then that's totally okay. If you want to bring it up, you're going to have to ask for permission. And that sounds something like, I have a couple of questions about work. Is it okay if we take a few minutes and go over those since I have you here? They'll probably say okay, but it keeps things from getting complicated and messing up your relationship. So just like you shouldn't sell on the fly, don't try and coach on the fly. If you're in a friend situation and you notice something that needs to be talked about, set up a time to talk about that topic specifically. Your relationship will be way better off for it. People stay in jobs where they have friends, and it's also important to not take their decisions personally as a friend. Not everyone stays in the business for life, and their decision to quit, while it can give you clues as to how to grow as a leader, their quitting is not usually based on you. If you put too much pressure on your friends to stay, you're going to risk their friendship. So support their decision if they choose to do the business, and support their decision if they choose to leave. So your action now is to make a list of your own expectations and boundaries. I suggest that you make your expectations values-based rather than actions-based. So an example of that is, rather than saying, I expect you to have one appointment every week, your expectation would be more like, I expect you to be honest with me